I want to start off with the credit card e-check funding process. This has been significantly enhanced in this version, and it does some very, very powerful features to help manage the funding process as well as when transactions are rejected. So this flow chart here, and we're going to start at the top, is when you first create a new credit card or e-check transaction. And remember, you could create a credit card or e-check transaction either manually, one-off, by just creating one to pay any invoice or take a payment on account. The recurring process can automatically do that if the customer is set up. And we're going to talk about also how to use the automation system to automatically submit those. That was a feature that was released a couple releases ago, but we'll talk about that a little bit in a few moments. Now, when you create a new transaction, one of two things is going to happen right away. It's either going to be flagged as approved or denied. So let's talk about denied first. If the transaction is denied, that means for whatever reason it was denied and it's not going to be funded. Now, if it's a credit card transaction, typically it's going to be denied if they're over their credit limit, or if it's a bad credit card number, or if the account's closed. If it's an ACH transaction, it's probably going to be denied only if it's a duplicate transaction or if it's a bad bank routing number or something like that. But most credit e-checks will approve right off the bat. Now, if it goes into the approval status, it will automatically then create the payment transaction in AlarmBiller, and it flags that transaction as approved. And if it was for an invoice, it will apply it to that invoice. Now, what happens though is the transactions have to go through a funding process, either through, if it's a credit card, it will happen through the merchant services, through Forte, or if it's an e-check, a bank account, it has to be submitted through Forte to the Federal Reserve to get funding. At that point, that transaction can either become rejected or funded. So if it's a credit card and you got a preliminary approval, more than likely it's going to be funded. If it's a bank account, an e-check, and it was approved, it has to go through the Fed system, and at that point it's either going to be rejected or funded. So that's where that approved status will go from rejected to funded. Now, if it's rejected, the application will automatically, because you're not going to get funds in your bank account for that transaction, so AlarmBiller now will automatically reject that transaction, reverse the payment out of AlarmBiller, unapply that payment to that from that invoice. So it will keep a history record of that payment, but it will show as a $0 amount, because at this point it's been rejected. If it's funded, meaning we did receive final approval, it's funded, and we know the money is now going to go into your bank account, it will be marked as a funded transaction, and at that point it will be keep the transaction as is, the money will be in your bank account, and the payment will be applied against the customer. But there's one extra thing that can happen, and AlarmBiller now will automatically track that, and that is what's called a previously funded then rejected transaction. So typically these are going to be more e-check transactions, but it can also be a credit card transaction at some times. And what this is a transaction that was funded, meaning you received the money, it was deposited into your bank account, but maybe the customer called their bank or credit card company and they said, I didn't approve this and I'm going to dispute it, and then the transaction gets rejected, meaning they're going to now take the money back out of your bank account. So what's going to happen is on that transaction, the payment originally was made and deposited in your account, so AlarmBiller cannot reverse that payment or make that payment go away. Instead, it has to create a new transaction for that. So what it's going to automatically do is it needs to put the money back open on that customer's account. So it will automatically create an invoice for that customer for the amount of the transaction that was rejected, and it will automatically charge that to your bank account. So when you look at your financial reports, you'll see that the money is actually coming out of your bank account. And then you have an additional receivable because now the customer owes you that money again. So this is the new flow, and this is all automated within AlarmBiller. So it's going to happen for you automatically. You don't have to worry about this. In a moment, I'm going to also talk about how the funded or rejected statuses are going to be used when we do the payment processing. I'll come back to that in just a moment. But I want to go to this next slide. This next slide will show you what each one of these statuses are. So just as a recap of what I said, if the transaction is approved when you first create it, what you really have done is you received a preliminary approval. And the payment transaction will be created in AlarmBiller just as it is now. If that transaction is denied initially, no payment will be created within AlarmBiller. Now, if the transaction was approved and then later it is rejected, meaning you're not going to get funding on that, that's an immediate rejection, usually known within a day or two, the payment amount will be removed from AlarmBiller. The payment will go to zero, and the payment that was applied to the original invoice will automatically be unapplied. So the original invoice will stay open. If the transaction is funded, then the transaction will be marked as funded, and the payment will stay as is. Now, in order to reconcile your payments under the payment processing, every transaction within that transaction file, that payment batch, has to either be flagged as rejected or funded. And it will not allow you to actually reconcile that deposit until you've received each one of these. And I'll show you this in just a moment. And then the last one is the previously funded then rejected transaction. So you've already received the money, but now it's going to come back out of your account at a later date. So at this point, a new invoice will be created in AlarmBiller, and it will automatically be posted to your bank account. So it's going to use an item code that will automatically be sent to your bank account. Now, with a little, two other things that I just want to show you, and these are the credit card e-check emails that you'll start seeing coming into your email. And this is set up in your company setup. This first email, okay, so let me go back to these two emails that I was talking about. These emails are showing us when you submit transactions to Forte, this will now show you what was approved and what was denied. And it will give you a summary also by credit card and by e-check. And this is really nice, especially if you're using the automation feature within AlarmBiller. Now what the automation feature will do is it will automatically submit any credit cards or e-checks that are due as of that day. So you don't have to manually go in there and do that. And this will automatically submit those. The second email down here in the bottom right, the second email over here on the bottom right is actually a report that you're going to get every day, and you should see this coming in the morning, that will show you the transactions that were funded during that automatic process, where it's going to tell you everything that's either been funded or rejected. So here you can see at this time I have 4 transactions that were funded, and if anything was rejected, I would have seen those also, as well as if it's rejected, you'll get a detail of those transactions. So, okay, I'm back. I apologize again. This time I actually called in through my cell phone, so hopefully we don't have this issue again with dropping out. So let me go ahead and actually go into AlarmBiller now, and I'm actually going to go through and demonstrate the functionality and talk about what we just did.
So what you'll see here, and the best way to do that is almost when I go into my payment. So I'm going to click on payments here to go into my payments tab. And from here, you can see that I have open deposits. And you'll notice there's a new column in here. And this column is really only important for a batch that's either an e-check or a credit card transaction batch. If it's just a manual payment batch with checks that you entered, everything will automatically just be settled. You can only do the reconciliation and flag something as reconciled if all the settled transactions are set to yes. Now here you can see this batch right here. I actually have 4 e-check transactions in it, and it says settled yes equals yes. So if I'm going to click on to open the batch. If you notice also, a lot of our views will be changing, and before we had a view button in this column to open it, we're now going to just use the batch number. This gives us more room on the screen. So I'll just click on my batch number to open that batch, and this will show every payment that was received within this batch. And I can also see individually every payment, whether it was settled, yes or no. And again, if I drill into the actual payment to look at it, there's a new feature within here now where I can actually click on and say view transaction. And by clicking on the view transaction, I can see the transaction that was created here. And you'll notice here that I'll see that my submitted date, when this was submitted, my settlement date, and that's the date and time that this was settled, and then the transaction status. So the final status will be funded, as it is in this case. Now, until it's funded or rejected, it would be just in an approved status because it was an approved transaction. Okay? So that's a nice place that you can see those transactions and what's going on with them. So going back to my payment batch, let's go back into there. You'll see that I have another payment batch over here that has a credit card transaction in it, and it says settled no. That means that at this point, we are still waiting to receive back the final settlement on that. Now, credit cards would normally come back in 1 day. I'm using a test data system. They're not real credit cards. So none of my credit cards will actually fund and approve and get final settlement. So you notice there is no settlement date in here because at this point, I haven't received that back. Okay? So that's going to be new within the process on how to handle your automatic settlement of your credit cards and your e-checks. Now, because this is set to settle no, if I click on edit here and I try to reconcile this transaction, this payment batch, it's not going to let me do it. It's going to give me a warning message. All transactions in the deposit must be funded and or rejected to reconcile. So at this point, it's not going to let me do that. Okay, this one over here, because I have all of them, it says settled yes, I can go ahead and reconcile that. And now by putting it to reconcile, it will automatically reconcile it, and it will remove it from my open payment list. So that is how your payment batches work, and that's how all of the new transactions will flow through the approved, denied, funded, rejected, and previous funded statuses. Again, if you have any questions on this, put those down there, or feel free to put those and submit those. Now, there's something else you can also do with a transaction. That's void the transaction. So you could also have a void status. You can only void a payment transaction up prior to actually submitting it for payment. So if you do void it, it will automatically set the transaction to 0 for you. Okay. So that's the void transactions. Now, as long as I'm on the payment screen, a few other things I just want to show you right from here. The first is the unapplied payment tab. This was put in a few releases ago, but this is a real nice feature. What this is showing me is every customer that I currently have that has unapplied cash or payments on account. So if you notice my first customer here, ABC Liquor Store, they have a total balance due of $292, but $50 of that is unapplied. And the nice thing is I could hit the arrow to the left, and it will show me every unapplied payment that we receive from this customer. And if I want to, I could just click apply right from here to apply this payment to an invoice on that customer's account. So let's just say I wanted to actually apply it to this invoice right over here. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll click apply. And now it's actually applied that payment to the customer. And let's just go back into our payments now. And you'll see that if I go back into my unapplied payments, that invoice or that unapplied payment for ABC Liquor is no longer there. So what's nice about this form, it's a nice place to go in and use it to clean up any unapplied cash at the end of any month or at any point in time. You can see what's outstanding as unapplied cash. Okay. Just reading through my notes here. Give me 1 second. Okay. So there's also, let's jump into the report menu too, because there's some new reports, and especially the funded report, that works real well with what we just did here. So let's click on the funded transaction report. And what's nice about this report is I can run this for any date range that we're looking for. So I can run it for a specific date, or here I'm running it for a whole month. And you'll notice I have where I can run my funded transactions, my rejected transactions, and my pending transactions. So let me turn off the rejected and funded for a second. I'll just click Run Report to update this. And I'm going to remove the filter so I could see it a little bit bigger. But here's all my pending transactions. So what these are, you could see it's broken up by both e-checks and then by credit cards. And what these are all the transactions that have been submitted through Forte, have been preliminary approved, but we haven't received back the final rejected or approved status. And then once we do see those would then come up in either our funded or our rejected sections of the report. So let's go run it from those two. And now I could see everything that was either funded previously, or I could see everything that was previously rejected. Okay? So this is a real nice report because it's going to give you all the detail of everything that's been approved and funded and then rejected, and again also your pending transactions. So that's a nice report, and probably recommended that you look at that periodically to go through everything. Okay. Okay, let me go back. I'm going to go into the Setup tab for a moment. I just want to touch base and review the automation section. So what we have in the automation section is the ability to do your automatic submitting of both your Forte transactions as well as your your recurring invoices. But there's also a new feature we added, and that's called the Forte funding. So what's going to happen is every morning when you come into the office, because it happens in the middle of the night, AlarmBiller is going to check for the funding of any transactions. But if you want to do that at any point in time, you can just go ahead and say Run Now. And what this will do, are you sure you want to run this batch? You just click OK. And that's all you have to do, and it will go out and it will actually now check for any Forte funded transactions. You will get an email notification letting you know what's funded and what's not, what was rejected. Typically, you'll get that within just a few seconds, so maybe a couple minutes after you do that. So that's a nice way in case you wanted to see something in the middle of the day and just do a quick update on that. Just as a note, what you'll find when you do that, it's more going to give you your credit card data, because most e-checks really only happen once a day, the way the feds work, and it happens overnight. But it is a way that you could actually do it for your credit cards a little bit faster. Okay, so that's, and the other thing with the automation is turning it on. If you want to automatically have AlarmBiller submit your Forte transactions. So that would be any credit card or e-check transactions that are sitting out there waiting to be submitted, that need to be submitted for that date based upon the funding date. This will automatically submit them at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Again, you could always manually submit them, but this will do that, and plus you'll get the email letting you know what was submitted. I won't go into the detail on the RMR automation settings. We did that on the last webinar, but if you have any questions, just email support. But this is a utility where you can set up for your RMR invoices, your recurring invoices, to automatically be generated for you, where you don't have to even go in there and process them. The system will do it based upon the day of the month and the rules that you specified how you want them to happen. Okay. Okay, so let me just go through my notes again, make sure I covered everything so far. Okay. Okay, so let's just go through a few other things within the system. And I'm going to click on work orders here. And we're going to click on jumping into work orders now. And this is a new nice feature that was added. I'm going to click on an existing work order that's already open. So here we're looking at a work order. And you'll notice within a work order, there's a tab here that says current system parts. This is all the equipment that has been previously installed at this customer. And the nice thing now is you can actually add a new part right within here without having to go into the customer's record to do this. So this is really nice for a technician in the field if they're using an iPad or a Google tablet, and they do an inventory of what's already been installed for that customer. They could just come over here. They could pick the part that's been previously installed there. They could put the location. You know, I could say it went by the the bedroom door. If there was a zone number assigned to it, if I know the actual install date, I could put that. I could even put a serial number in here. And this will now add that part to the customer's equipment list. So that's a nice feature, especially in the field if you want to really start capturing what was installed at for each one of your systems, if you currently don't have that information. Another thing that was updated on a work order, the PO number has been increased to 25 characters in length. So if I click edit here to edit this work order, you'll notice that the field name, the purchase order number now has been increased, and we had quite a few customers who have asked for that to make that a longer field number, so I can really type in pretty much as I want here now. Okay, so let's go. I'm going to come out of here. I'm not going to save that. I'm going to go back into the payments, and what we've also done is we have the ability to do payments. We have the regular batch payments, deposit features, but we also have the batch payment feature. The batch payment feature was added a couple releases ago, and what it allows you to do is to add multiple checks very quickly from your payments. So all I have to do is come over here and click add a payment for a customer. I could type in a customer name or select their number. So if I just know their customer number, I could start typing. I could pick the customer. It shows me how much money they owe, if they have any late fees. All I do is come over here. I type in their check number. I could type in I can also come over here and I could select for any of their open invoices. So you notice this customer has 3 different open invoices. So if they're paying a specific invoice number, I could just go ahead and pick that invoice number. And then I'd have to choose the amount of the payment that they're paying for. So maybe they're paying $500, okay? And if they were paying anything towards the late fee, I could put that in here. And then I could come in here and I could add my next payment and so on. Okay, so I could come over here, I could pick the next customer, put their check number in. Again, if I don't have a specific invoice, I do not have to put that in there. And what it will do is it will do the auto apply then and automatically apply this payment from the oldest invoice to the newest invoice. So really, that's all I have to do this. If everything looks good, I just click Apply Batch, and this will now create that payment batch for us. And now I could come back into my payments, and I could see there's my deposit. If I look at this deposit, I could see both checks that were entered for both customers. And if I came over here and I looked at the first payment that we did, you'll see that that was automatically applied to that one invoice number, 10497. So it automatically did that because we selected that invoice number to do it from. So that's a new feature, and it really, the payment batch is really nice because it really makes the data entry very, very fast for entering your payments. Okay, so a few other things I'll just talk about, and then we'll go to the questions. We have, these are some new features that will be upcoming in the next release, hopefully within the next week or two. But we have actually enhanced the logo resolution, both for the screen and for invoices and work orders. And as I've been told by our development team, that it's now Retina display quality. So we've worked hard on this. Believe it or not, it's tough because we're trying to manage all the different graphic files, and so that was a nice feature that's coming out. We are adding the to the automation system, the automatic delivery of invoices. So you notice right now, if I click on my invoices over here, and then we go into and we say invoices credits not delivered. So I have 2 invoices credits that haven't been delivered. What the automation will do is at the end of every day, or at the time that it's scheduled, it will automatically deliver any invoices that need to be delivered, whether they're for email or whether they are for the mail service, and we're going to mail the invoices out for you. So that's coming out too. The other feature that's coming that we're real excited about, and we're just finishing the final touches on it now, is going to be the ability to do refunds for a credit card or an e-check directly through AlarmBiller. So in that case, you won't have to go to the gateway, and that's what we're trying to do, is eliminate all the need to go to the gateway so that you'll be able to refund money to a customer right through the gateway. And from a control standpoint, we'll make sure that only administrators can do that, as well as you'll only be able to refund transactions that you previously funded. So there's security on that, so that someone just can't miscellaneous go in and do refunds inadvertently. And then some other things that are in the works, I don't know if they'll make the next release, but they're coming soon, is your work order, appointment dispatching, arriving, completion, the whole management of that will be soon available directly from the calendar. And we're also going to have a complete technician customer notification to automatically notify customers with new work orders, new appointments, when dispatches are made, as well as notifying the technicians. So those are some things that are coming in the future. There's also a few other reports that I just want to touch base on. there's a really nice new report that I like this one a lot. It's called, and where is it here? Okay. It's the here's a customer auto pay report, and this report will detail and list all of the customers that are currently set up for auto pay within the system. There are also new reports that are going to be released in the upcoming releases, but there's going to be a recurring revenue, or what we call an RMR in-force report, that will show list all of your recurring revenue. We've improved the customer listing so that you can sort and select by customer status. There'll be some salesperson's reports, site listing reports, and there's going to be a work order appointment tech time report, so which will break out all the appointments, with showing all the time on site as well as the dispatch and the travel time. So some nice reports coming in the next release or two as well. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few questions, and let me just go through the question board here. Give me 1 second here as I open this up. There we go. So it says, are there any, so here I'm talking about the credit card transactions we talked about earlier. Are there going to be any corresponding reports or alerts for any of these transactions that are denied, rejected, or previously funded, then rejected? Yes. So as I said and showed you the emails, you'll be getting emails that will notify you of these automatically, as well as you could run the funded credit card report that would show you that, all the funded, rejected, and pending transactions. Okay. Can we have those emails reports for Forte go to multiple email addresses? Right now, it just goes to one. So if you wanted that to go to multiples, you might want to create a distribution list for that. But I will talk to the development team. I think that's a good idea. Maybe we could create the ability to have that go to multiple email address. Okay. What this says, what do you mean a payment can be funded then rejected? Once a payment is funded, how is the bank rejecting it? That's a really good question. So what can happen is, let's take an e-check. So you process an e-check for a customer, and it gets funded. And the bank takes the money, the feds they'll take the money out of the customer's account and put it into your account. The way that the e-check processing systems work, if a customer then goes to the bank and says, I didn't approve this transaction, I don't want Acme Alarm Companies to take this money out, put it back in my account, the bank was going to automatically do that. They're going to do what's called a reversal. And they're going to put the money back into the customer's account, and then the money is going to come back out of your account. Unfortunately, that's part of the risk and problems of taking an e-check. There's nothing you can do to stop the bank from doing that. It works a little bit differently with a credit card, but with an e-check, if the customer says that, the bank's going to do that. Even if customer gave you authorization to do that. At that point, you would have a battle, and you could go fight with the customer to go get payment for it, and that would become a civil matter. But that's what would happen. That's called a previously funded rejected transaction. And so that's how something like that can happen. And the credit card, you have a little bit more control, because if you could prove to your credit card company that you had approval and authority, they won't let the customer just reverse that transaction. They might reverse it, but then they're going to fund it back to you and give you the money back later. Unfortunately, with e-checks, that's not the way it works. And so there is a little bit more inherent risk on your part with an e-check in case that happens. So that's what that means. Hopefully I explained that well enough. Can you show an example of how to avoiding a transaction under payments? Yeah, I'll do that. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. This one says, we print all of our monitoring invoices ourselves. If we automate the RMRs, will it just dump all the invoices and the invoices not delivered? Yes, that's what happens. When you go and you generate your recurring invoices, up until you actually print the invoices, they will all be in that bucket that says invoices not delivered. And then you could just go into that invoices not delivered and just click print all, and it will just print all of those at that point in time. Okay. It says the batch payment is great, but we run into problems if they are paying on multiple invoices with one check. Yeah, that's a good point, and that's why we still have the other payment batch function. So you can always go in and just regularly add a manual payment, and then apply the check as you wish to any specific invoices. But remember, the payment batch is really to make it fast when you don't have to do that, but then you always have the option to go into the payment batch to do that when needed. On the credit card check tab, what does the status S mean? I got to go look at that. I'm not sure. And last question I have here, there will be a sales report that I could check the sales of each salesperson and the sales and customers. That's correct. That's a report that's coming out, hopefully in the next release or the one thereafter, to be able to do that. So let's just go into a customer real quick here. And let me just do this. And so here, I'm going to pick this customer. And let's just go into a credit card transaction. What you can do is, if you had a pending transaction for a customer, and here I'll click on a new transaction, you will have the ability to create and void that. So what I'm going to do is, so this one doesn't get funded today, I am going to change the funding date from today till tomorrow. So I'm going to use this, they don't have any check on account, let's just use a credit card. Of course I picked a customer that doesn't have one. I know this customer does. It'll be faster than setting one up real quick. So let's go into the credit card transactions, and I'm going to create a new credit card transaction, or a new transaction for this customer. And let's say that the customer doesn't want us to take the money out till tomorrow, so we'll just put in the future. I'll pick the each. And now what I could do is I could go into my credit card e-check, okay, and if I view that transaction that we just did, and where's that transaction? Is this it? Okay, I can, no, that's not the right one. But you do have the ability, and this one's, I just picked the wrong one, but you will have the ability to void that transaction. And you can void it up to the point that it was funded. So if it wasn't funded and settled, you can void it, and voiding it will actually reverse that transaction automatically for you. So it's a nice way to do that. Let me see if I have, where's that transaction? Oh, there it is, right there. sorry, there's the transaction we did. So I could click void right here to void this transaction. And if I void it, it will void the transaction, okay? And now I can see that my transaction has been voided, and it automatically will reverse that payment for us automatically and set that payment transaction to $0. So that's what that does, okay? All right, and see if any other questions came in, and if not, we will we'll wrap it up. So that's it. So I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. We do have another webinar coming up this Thursday.